Hello, everyone. My name is John. I go by The Real John. And this is essentially a kind of state of the channel update video just because things have been so sporadic in my upload schedule as of late, and I feel like it's necessary to kind of update y'all on what's been going on. If you've been following me on Blue Sky, then you kind of have a gist of it, but for the sake of clarity, I just wanted to discuss how things are not good. The state of the channel is that things are bad. And last year was a bad year. I lost my cat Mama Boots of 6 years to sudden onset illness that just got worse. And uh beyond that, I just have been dealing with chronic health issues, specifically these headaches that have been making it nigh impossible to really try and focus on editing anything. I dropped my, I dropped in editing the videos. I've dropped in editing audio for the tabletop podcast I do. I, I had to have other players take up DMing for my weekly D&D group. It's just not been great. And, that was like last year issues. And then as the year went on, things didn't really get better. And this year, things haven't been much better either. I've been once again struggling with figuring out what is the underlying cause of my chronic headaches so that I could finally get treatment, because I assumed it was allergy related because it's up in my sinuses, and it felt like that was the underlying cause. But allergy testing came back negative for basically everything but dust mites. And for 10 years of chronic headaches, dust mites, that just that just doesn't hold water. And so I'm back to square one and trying to figure out what is behind all this. And in the meantime, I'm struggling to get anything done. And I think on top of that is the fact that the isolation is really starting to hit me. After the pandemic, I lost my in real life friend group, mainly because our regular game nights and hangout sessions were cut off by the pandemic, and then I stopped using Facebook just for my own, because that site is so unusable anymore. So, but in doing so, I cut off basically every person I know offline. So I haven't been in touch with them for years because I've stopped using Facebook. And so, in between that and the fact that I just have been hesitating to really go out and do anything, especially since as the pandemic was going on, I moved back in with my parents after, in 2019, I was assaulted on the job when I worked at a halfway house. And that whole thing ended in disaster of being denied unemployment because of a tactic they pulled on me. And so it was a bad time. I would not say that right now is as bad as then, but it's feeling close. The isolation is really starting to hit. And I think what hasn't helped is that I can't feel any connection with people. And where that comes from specifically, I mean, that's the thing. It's like I've always been kind of like transient friendships. There are some friends I still keep in touch with from college. I basically keep in touch with nobody from high school. I never really had any ride or die friends that I knew since I was a kid. My friends have always been determined by who was close by at this given moment. And then no, I never really keep in touch with them. They haven't really felt the need to keep in touch with me after that situation changes and we're no longer in proximity. And so I think that, and the same thing goes online. Like the online friends I've met are only as close as as we've been in those same circles. Once I left an online circle, that friendship is basically dead. And so that hasn't helped. And then uh, 2 years ago in September, there was a point where some kind of misunderstanding led to the real time watching of being blocked by what I thought was a friend group. And I could have been misinterpreting, because that's the thing is I modded for one of the people in the group, and the fact that there was no confirmation about what's going on is just literally watching myself be blocked by them on every social media outlet in real time, and then realizing I've been booted from the server where I was a mod, and that kind of thing really fucks you up. And it's like I did hold animosity to them for doing that, and there's still a little bit of there, but I also recognize that that sort of behavior is done because there is a concern for the well-being of the group. That they felt that I crossed some sort of line. That's exactly what they're going to do for their own safety and well-being. I don't know what misunderstanding did it, but it was another case of the fact that I can't, in this space, VTubing, streaming, you know, being fans of online artists and producers and whatnot, that parasocial nature blurs the line between what you think, who you think your friends are, especially the lower down you are. Like, it's one thing with, like, the idols or, like, very high profile streamers who have hundreds, if not thousands, of people in the audience. Not everybody in that audience is their friend. They're supporters and whatnot, yeah, but when it comes down to smaller creators, very mid-tier creators, people with tens, then dozens, then hundreds of people in their audience, sometimes those connections are a bit more nebulous. Sometimes they're not full on friendships, but you can never really tell. And I think I more than likely misinterpreted something that was a friendship when it was more of a peer, not even a peer, just creator audience relationship. And yet at the same time, like, that, going about it in that regard, just complete blackout, and no means of, like, contacting, like, what, like, this is what you did, for our well-being, we're cutting you, we're cutting you off. I don't know, so I don't it felt well, number one, it felt very unnecessary. It felt like the nuclear option for something that was very much not requiring that situation. But at the same time, I don't know what they thought was going on, and that's all water. That's almost 2 full years ago now, and that's water under the bridge at this point. But I bring it up because I think that's further ruined my ability to feel connected to any community. I just left a whole bunch of Discord servers I was in, just because, well, number one, I was in over 100 of them. I think I still am. Even the ones I left, I don't think I was enough to get under 100. But I couldn't keep up to date with all of them, and there are just some where I did not genuinely feel a part of that community, and not for lack of the community's part. It's just when you see how fragile these sorts of connections are, how quickly they can just be cut off at the drop of a hat over any number of issues, serious or not. You see how shaky the foundations are. And I can't settle down and feel connected in any of these spaces, knowing that all it will take is a misunderstanding and then I'm gone. And then it's just gone from me forever. And I think that's just made the isolation worse. Like, I stay at home, except when I go to the movies and when I go to work. And and of course, my parents live out in the exurbs, is what they're called. They're further from the suburbs. They're basically that last bit of development before you hit farm country. And that's essentially where my parents ended up moving and staying for most of my life. And in wanting to ensure that I was, because I had been living on my own for a couple of years before then, before the assault happened. And it was after the assault, 2019 was another really bad year because working at that halfway house was just soul destroying. And it was, I could go, it would probably take years to unpack the damage that working there has done, and not from any of the fault of the inmates. I'll tell you that much. But in moving back with my folks, I ended up being further away from general gathering spots. Like, there's no really place to go and meet people except to go for, and unless you're driving 5 minutes and more likely 20 minutes. Like, in order to get to theaters, I basically have to go to the next towns over in order to see a movie. And when you add a commute to the idea, to socializing, that becomes, there's less incentive to do that versus talking with people online, even though it's not the same. Having that in-person social aspect is always going to be more impactful than online stuff by itself. But I've isolated myself physically, but that even online, like, I only really have one Discord I'm in 100% of the time and I'm 100% active in. All the rest, I basically lurk. And part of me wonders if I shouldn't leave even more, even because the ones I left were the ones where I just genuinely felt like I wasn't connecting with anybody. And the one, not for any fault of the streamer, not for any fault of the community, just I didn't feel at home. And I'm wondering if there's even more that I should leave in that same regard, just from not, just because the ones that, even the ones that I'm do feel at home in, I don't feel safe. Like, not safe's the wrong word. I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel at home. It's like they've welcomed me, but I'm still, I can't relax. And I think it once again comes down to so many of these online communities, they're built on foundations of sand and mud, not rock. Because once again, if all it takes is a single misunderstanding for the whole thing to just be wiped clean, that it's not a very stable kind of relationship being built there. And so yeah, I'm by myself, and for almost a year now, I've been without a therapist as well, just because every time my therapist retired, and not even all a year, it's been only 4 months, but my therapist retired, and every attempt to get a new one has been met with scheduling difficulties. So it becomes so I'm struggling to really, I'm struggling on that aspect as well because I don't really have anybody to talk to. Even when I had my in real life friends, there were only a few that I could really break down to about this. And nowadays, with the offline friends kind of scattered to the winds, not and that's the thing is, even with the friends that I've made that are willing to talk to me about these sorts of things and to be willing to let me vent and let me talk about these struggles, every single time they start popping up, I'm like, I can't bother them. I can't bother them. This is my, why would I bother them? Why would I make my problems their problems? Despite the fact that they have vocally confirmed that you can make your problem, that I will listen to your problems, my brain refuses to believe that it's okay to give them my problems because that's not fair to them. And so, what it's come down to is the last 2 years of my life. It was fine enough when I had the therapist, but especially the last couple of months, there's nobody I can really go to. Like, there's a couple of people who really stuck their necks out for me. There were two that were there in 2023 when that whole thing happened with that previous group I was part of, that previous community I was in. When that all fell apart, there were two specific friends. I would call them friends that really really listened to me and really took my concerns to heart and helped me through that. And yet, they themselves are going through their own things. They're going through job issues. They're going through their own personal changes, and then personal life changes. And so it feels all the worse to come to them when they're dealing with their own, probably more serious stuff. If you're talking job stress and cost of living stress and personal relationship changes and struggles, you don't you don't want that one friend who's always laying their problems at you. And I don't want to do that to that. I feel like I can't do that to anybody. I said this on Blue Sky. The way I describe it is, I feel like I take up space, and I wish I could take up less space. That I always feel like I'm in the way, that I'm bothering people by just being there. That my being there is cumbersome and unwelcome, and that that everybody's just annoyed at me even being there. And I just want to be I want to be small, and I want to be out of the way, and I don't want to bother anybody. And I just, in dealing with all of this, like, I can't take it to anybody else because that's that's me being in the way. That's me taking up their space, being in their space now. And so, when and it's and these are and like sure, I could try and talk to my parents about it, my nephew who lives with us, family members like that. Like, I could try talking to them, but like, I don't know how to explain this to them. Like, I don't know how to explain it to them in a way that they understand what I'm dealing with. And so that I just basically, once again, kind of isolated myself away from everybody, to the point where I feel like I shouldn't be in chats or in Discord servers, because if I bring this up, I'll kill the mood. I'll kill the vibe. Even in the venting stuff, like even in places that would have a venting space, I feel like my being there is making things worse for everybody else. Like my being there with my especially if I'm open about my problems, then once again, I'm taking up the space, and people will want me to leave so that I'm not taking up the space. And I don't know how true it is, but but I can't. It is the dominant feeling anytime I try to socialize anymore, and I don't know where to go from there. And so all of these things, not to mention the fact that the government itself has a head of the health has the head of health wanting to wanted me to put me on a list because I was diagnosed on the spectrum 20 like almost 30 years ago. And so like all of the bigger picture stuff, I think that's another thing that's been adding on top of it is so much out of my control, and it's all and it is and by design it's given to us fire hose style. It's a fire hose of shit on us at all times, and it's by design so that we feel disempowered, we feel powerless, we feel incapable of handling all of this stream of shit coming at us all the time. And so there's that. And this time it finally got. I used to be able to kind of, just like, um, what's the word for it? Like, basically pull myself away from those things. Like, once recognize that they're out of my control, so that I don't worry about them in in a way that would drive that it's driving me to this point. But just knowing that my having autism could very well put me, not only put me on the list, but it could very well put me in a camp, because they've definitely talked about that. I think it finally really hit home how fucked things are. And that's just made it all the more burdensome to pay attention to what's going on, just knowing that there's that target on my back. And like I said, there's nobody I can really turn to in all of this, because I've gone and through my own, you know, unwillingness to deal with to keep in touch with people outside, if I leave a thing, and my inability to really form strong friendship bonds and keep them going has kind of left me permanently isolated. And I think it's finally just starting to catch up with me. And and so that's kind of where things are at. Is I'm trying to get the 2024 videos done, and every day I think, okay, once I get home I can start doing some editing, and then I'm so tired from work that I just want to sit and veg and stop thinking. I've lost a lot of that creative spark. I've lost a lot of that creative energy that I had, and right now, and especially in the wake of everything that's happening, it feels less and less like doing you're making the stuff that I want to make matters. And people will tell me otherwise, but it's hard to overcome that feeling that whatever making a thing doesn't matter to anybody. But I just gotta try and get through it, and hopefully I'll finally be able to pinpoint what exactly has been going on health wise and deal with the chronic pain finally in a way that I, I'm no longer dealing with, it's no longer a hindrance to me. Like, I ended up having to call off of work the day of recording this, and I left the day before. I ended up leaving work after having a breakdown, my meltdown, as my mom would call them, because I constantly have had those throughout my life when I get to a point where I'm overstimulated and stressed out, and I have nothing else, and everything feels too much, and I feel overwhelmed. I melt down, and I had one of those, and ended up having to leave work because there is this. It feels like what it is. It feels like a vice is strapped onto the front of my face. And so the nose and behind the eyes and all that. That's why I always thought it was allergies, is because the pain is coming from the sinuses. And yet every sort of allergy treatment, hasn't worked. Like, I took Mucinex the day, that day, and all that ended up happening was having a massive headache, and then eventually my nose started bleeding later that night, which has been happening every so often when I take these allergy treatments for whatever this is. It just ends up causing nosebleeds. So yeah, that hopefully I can find the underlying cause of whatever the problem is, and I can finally deal with that treatment, get that treated, and it can, even if it's not something that could be fixed or cured, at least it's something that can be treated and taken care of. And I don't know. I think I do want to pull back from a lot of the VTubing spaces. I was planning on trying to do an intro to Blue Sky for VTubers and see if they want to try to bring them over there. But honestly, I kind of feel like at this point, if you haven't felt the need to come over, if Twitter is still if you've basically resigned yourself to Twitter and aren't even coming to Blue Sky as like a reprieve from that to do in your spare time away from promoting stuff, then I don't know what to tell you, because that you're just there now. That we've chosen to stay there. There's nothing I can say to really convince you to come over otherwise, because there's no real convincing. So I don't know. I don't know if I could retool that into a way of like helping the people the VTubers who are already on Blue Sky to better use the platform or whatnot. But yeah, a lot of a lot of things have just been kind of like disenchanting me from the mainstream VTubing space. There was the frickin' AI driven Sims clone that everybody, particularly agency, VTubers were promoting to hell and back. Even the ones that I knew, in fact, that I've known, in fact, are artists. They're like, no, no, this is fine. This is the latest hot new thing, even though it's they're employing AI and have talked about replacing their artists with AI. Hey, they gave us money to promote it, and it looks cool, guys. Doesn't it look cool? It's RTX, and it's like, God damn it. You just really don't care, do you? You just genuinely you're so cut off from the reality of what's going on that you just can't be bothered to care even a little bit that this company is coming for your artists. And for for those who are artists, they want to cut you out. They want to normalize this. And you're okay. And so yeah, there's that. There's all kinds of stuff. I think I just need to pull back and stop trying to socialize too much, because it's all it's going to do is remind me just how completely disparate the concerns are. You know, the concerns of the mainstream VTubing fandom and creators versus what's important, at least to me. What I'm passionate about, and it's like you just can't be bothered to care, and I don't know how to make you care if you can't care. Like, if nothing else has gotten you to care, I don't know what I can do to make you care. And so at that point, I think it's just better to just leave. Don't make a big deal about it. Don't make a stink about it, because all that's going to do is further entrench them and be like, fuck that guy because he's calling us out. I just rather leave the whole leave everything behind. I mean, I thought about it. I did think about just cutting off everything, starting over, not even calling myself a VTuber, leave the whole mess of it behind, and do my own thing, because goddamn, is this place a mess, you know? And nobody wants to take the effort and the time to clean it up. And so it's just going to stay a mess. But that's another thing that's out of my control. So, I don't know. If you listen to this sort of rambling therapy session, then thank you. I will try to get back on top of making things. It's just chronic mental and physical health problems have always gotten in the way. It just is what it is. So it's trying to make it work in spite of that. I guess best to end things on a positive note of some kind. And, well, I should rewatch Lord of the Rings recently, because a lot of those quotes have been really helpful in kind of keeping me centered. And I guess we'll leave with this quote from Fellowship from Gandalf, because I think it really sticks. I think this one and the Samwise one from Two Towers always stick with me. And when Frodo wishes that the ring had never have come to him, and that none of what was happening has happened, Gandalf tells him, "So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us." And right now, I think I really need to recenter and reprioritize what to do with my time. And if you spent your time listening to this old fart ramble about his problems, then thank you. Try to get back in shape and back on the wagon soon. Take care of yourselves.